We all think about locking our digital front doors, but in a world with constant online threats, just locking the door, well, it's just not enough. You need an alarm system. So today, we're going to dive into your network's digital watchdog, the Intrusion Detection System. Let's find out how this thing actually keeps you safe. All right, so here's our game plan. First up, we've got to define the enemy. What exactly is an intrusion? Then we'll get to know our digital alarm system and figure out how it spots trouble in the first place. After that, we'll look at what happens when that alarm actually goes off. And, super important, we'll talk about why no system is perfect. Okay, let's jump right into section 1. Before we can even think about catching these digital trespassers, we have to be super clear on what we're actually looking for. So it all comes down to one key word: unauthorized, right? Think about it like a real building. If you have a key and walk in, you're authorized. No problem there. But what if someone's trying to pick the lock or pry open a window? That's an unauthorized attempt. And that, in the digital world, is exactly what an intrusion is. It's someone trying to get in where they don't belong. So that leads to the big question, doesn't it? If a digital trespasser is trying to sneak around, how in the world do you catch them? How do you even know they're there before the damage is done? Well, the answer to that question brings us right to the main event, the Intrusion Detection System, or what we'll call an IDS. This is it. This is your digital alarm system. So let's break this down. An IDS really has 3 core jobs, right? First, it watches. It's just constantly monitoring everything happening on your network. Second, it identifies. It's analyzing all that activity, looking for anything that seems suspicious or just plain malicious. And third, it warns. It sounds the alarm and lets an actual person know, hey, something's not right over here. Okay, and this is a really important distinction to make because people mix this up all the time. An IDS is not a firewall. Think of it this way. A firewall is your locked door. It's a wall. Its job is to block stuff from getting in. An IDS, on the other hand, is your alarm system. It kind of assumes someone might get past the lock, so its whole job is to spot that suspicious activity and sound the alarm. They're a team, for sure, but they do very different jobs. Okay, so we've established that an IDS is our digital alarm system. That brings us to the next big question. How does it actually work? How does it spot the trouble? Well, the first part of the answer is all about where the IDS stands guard. It's got 2 main posts it can take. So on one hand, you have a network-based IDS, a NIDS. Think of this like a guard watching all the highways coming into a city. It sees all the traffic, looking for big, obvious problems like, say, a port scan, which is basically a bad guy walking down the street, jiggling every single doorknob to see if one is unlocked. Then you have a host-based IDS, a HIDS. This is like a security guard posted inside one super important building, like the city's main bank. It's not watching the highways, it's watching for anything weird happening inside that one building, like a file suddenly changing or someone trying to log in at 3 in the morning. So one gives you a wide view, the other gives you a deep view. And yeah, you often use them both together. And on top of where it's looking, it uses 2 main techniques to actually identify threats. This is where it gets really smart. Okay, check out these 2 different approaches. First, you've got signature-based detection. The best way to think about this is like a detective with a book of mugshots. It compares everything it sees to a huge database of known attacks. It's amazing for catching the usual suspects. But then you have anomaly-based detection. This is totally different. It's more like a veteran security guard who knows the building's routine inside and out. They don't need a mugshot. They can just tell when something feels off. They know it's normal, so they spot anything unusual. And this is how you catch brand new, never-before-seen attacks, what we call zero-day attacks, because defenders have had literally 0 days to prepare for them. All right, so the alarm's been triggered. The system spotted something. Now what? What actually happens when that alarm goes off? It's basically a 2-step process. Step 1 is the detection, which we've already covered. But step 2 is the response. And this is where you have a choice, because the system can be configured to act in very different ways. First, you've got your Passive IDS. This is your classic watchdog. It sees trouble, and it barks. A lot. It sends up a flare, generates an alert, logs everything. It makes sure a human knows there's a problem, ASAP. But that's it. It informs, it doesn't intervene. But then you have the Active IDS. This is the watchdog that not only barks, it bites. When this system detects a threat, it can automatically jump into action. It can do things like block the attacker's IP address or just drop the malicious packets right then and there. In fact,
This is such a different job that it gets its own name, an Intrusion Prevention System, or IPS. It's not just detecting, it's actively preventing the attack. Now, after hearing all that, you might be thinking, an IDS is the silver bullet for security. But, and this is a big but, the reality is always a little more complicated. No single system is ever perfect.
And here's why you can't just set one up and forget it. For starters, that signature-based detection we talked about, it needs to be updated constantly. If it's not, it's totally blind to new attacks. Then there's encryption. Attackers love it, because it's like they're sending their malicious code in a locked box that the IDS can't see inside. And finally, on really high-speed networks, an IDS can sometimes become a bottleneck, struggling to inspect every single piece of data flying by.
And that really brings us to the most crucial point of all. No single tool is a silver bullet for security. An IDS is absolutely essential, but it's one piece of a much larger puzzle. Real security is all about having layers of defense. You need the locked door, that's your firewall. You need the alarm system, that's your IDS. And you need the person watching the security monitors, your administrator. They all have to work together.
Which leaves us with one final thought to chew on. The threats out there are getting more and more sophisticated every single day. So the real question is, how do we make sure our digital defenses, our watchdogs, are evolving just as fast?